Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast. I am your host, Roy Garden, where we talk about recent events from the Trump White House and from our nation's capital and things going on around the world. I'm going to be taking more of a deep dive into this recent Macho Man Rally speech from Pete Hegseth and President Donald Trump. That's just one of the topics I want to cover, so let's go ahead and get into it and take a look at the headlines, because I won't be talking too much about those. You can look at them and see what's going on. One thing I will touch about that's very important to this country, of course, is the budget impasse between the Democrats and the Republicans. Trump's big, beautiful bill, or big, ugly bill, whichever side that you want to look at on that, is still as an impasse between the Republicans and Democrats. The Dems simply want to keep Medicaid and the ACA, or the Obama bill, as you want to call it. It's the Affordable Care Act, intact and funded. The Republicans do not want to do that, or they'll say, yeah, okay, we'll talk about that later, but just pass this bill. Well, the Democrats aren't going to budge. So, what are you going to do about it? So let me just touch briefly on that, because the Affordable Care Act and keeping Medicaid intact is extremely important to millions and millions of Americans who cannot afford health care. And a lot of seniors are on Medicare. I'm eligible for Medicare, okay? And then there's Medicaid for those who have extreme disabilities. They need that to, get their health care. The Republicans, of course, are out there telling you, the American people, this stupid thing about, all these illegal aliens are on that ACA and Medicare, and by God, we're going to freeze that because they don't deserve it. That is so freaking stupid, okay? I am not an illegal alien, and I at one time, my wife and I were on the ACA. We're not anymore, but we were at one time. It extremely helped us. And now, rates are going up on Medicare and Medicaid because the Republicans took all that money from there and threw it into funding ICE. And if you don't believe me, simply look at it. Take the time to look at this big, beautiful bill. You can see where all that money was redirected, besides the tax cuts. All right. Every country in the world has free health care, pretty much, except us in the U.S. And the ACA is one of the things that came even close to it. And of course, Republicans don't want you to have anything that is free. They either want you to be filthy rich and you pay for it yourself, or not at all. But Denmark, Sweden, all of those countries over there, Ireland, they have free health care. Canada has free health care, and along with free college education, but that's another topic. But so basically, let's get back to this. It is so simple to just keep that funded for people who cannot afford health care. Not everybody can reach in their pockets and pay $300 a month premiums. They just don't have it. All right. I know the rich do. And I know everybody that's in Congress and the Senate do, because they get theirs for free, plus they still get their salary. So, just keep that in mind, when you're talking to your congressional people. It is, this blame game, the Republicans blaming the Democrats, and the Democrats, of course, have a right to blame the Republicans, because their big, beautiful bill is a pile of poop. Really, it really is. It's tax cuts for the wealthy and huge funding for ICE, so they can keep rounding up 3,000 people a day. So that's what it is. So anyway, Trump announced he would be meeting with his budget chief, Russ Vought. Now, Russ Vought is an extremely important person. Okay. He is the guy that was the architect of the 2025, Project 2025, and he's going to meet with him to determine which of the many Democrat agencies, most of which are a political scam, he recommends to be cut. That's what he said. And this is because of the impasse between the big, beautiful bill being passed. And he wants to know if those cuts will be temporary or permanent. Now, the comments represented a dramatic about-face for Trump, who spent much of last year denouncing Project 25. He said, I don't know anything about Project 2025. The Heritage Foundations, as you know, there's a massive proposed overhaul of the federal government, which was drafted by many of his longtime allies and current and former administration officials. Both of Trump's Democratic rivals, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, made a far-right wish list, a centerpiece of their campaigns, and a giant replica of the book featured prominently on stage at the Democratic National Convention. Hopes fade for quick end to the government shutdown. Now, Donald Trump and his stooges lied through their teeth about Project 2025, and now he's running the country straight from the playbook. And so you need to take a look at that. Project 2025 is scary. Now, this guy right here, as I just talked to you about, is that gentleman. And he is just, continuing behind the scenes to put that Project 2025 playbook into action. Now, they know that if for some reason they lose the White House in 2028, it'll take the Democrats forever to put back together anything that they have done with this. This is why they're on this aggressive plan to implement Project 2025, and they are already through over more than 60% of it by dismantling, the government. And the whole plan is that the president has the sole and single power in turning this country into an authoritarian nation. And that guy that you just saw there, he just loves it. So, and that's why Trump is meeting with him. So when Trump is meeting with him, that just tells you right there, he knows all about Project 2025, and he has no room to be saying, I don't know anything about it, because he actually does. And it is scary. So, again, top Trump campaign leaders spent much of 2024 livid at the Heritage Foundation for publishing a book full of unpopular proposals that Democrats tried to pin on the campaign. They thought that stuff was supposed to be kept secret, and it wasn't. There were pictures of Trump on the plane with that guy I just showed you, and so he knew all about it. But he knew that if he talked about it during the campaign portion of his reelection, it had been unpopular. So now that he's in the office, he doesn't care what you think. So. It's just unbelievable. So, Trump has since gone on to stock his second administration with its authors of the Project 2025, including Voight, the board of czar Tom Homan, CIA Director John Radcliffe, immigration hardliner Stephen Miller, and Brandon Carr, who wrote Project 2025's chapter on the Federal Communications Commission. Now he chairs the panel. So this is all coming to light, Trump has seized on the government shutdown as an opportunity to reshape the federal workforce and punish detractors and people that tried to punish him, saying he planned to meet with the budget director Russ Voight to talk through temporary or permanent spending cuts. So there you go. It's there, folks. He knows all about Project 2025, and he is ready to rock and roll with that. Now, whether we will ever get this big beautiful bill or big ugly bill, depending on which side of the fence you're on, passed so we can refund the government, it's to be seen. The Democrats, in my opinion, and I know the MAGA force don't like it, but now they're even starting to say, Mr. President, we got to do something here, because thousands and thousands of people are not getting paid. I don't know if the Republicans will cave in on refunding Medicaid and Medicare and the Affordable Care Act or not. For insurance for people who can't afford it, because they themselves don't give a crap, because they got their insurance. The wealthy have their insurance. Paying $300 or $400 a month premiums for their insurance, it's no big deal to them, because they don't feel the pinch like most. Over 80% of the people in this country do. They don't have it, okay? They just, with inflation and everything, they just don't have the money to pay for those premiums. And everybody should be entitled to health care. And with the budget cuts that the Republicans have put through, people are getting less and less health care and costing them more and more, it's just not fair. So I don't think the Democrats are really asking too much, but these people seem to think that they are. So I don't know. Moving on, President Donald Trump has declared drug cartels to be unlawful and combatants and says the United States is now at an armed conflict with them, according to a Trump administration memo obtained by the Associated Press on this past Thursday. Following recent U.S. strikes on boats in the Caribbean, the memo appears to represent an extraordinary assertion of presidential war powers, with Trump effectively declaring that the trafficking of drugs into the United States amounts to armed conflict requiring the use of military force, a new rationale for past and future actions. Now, the president determined that the United States is in a non-international armed conflict with these designated terrorist organizations, the memo says. Trump directed the Pentagon to conduct operations against them pursuant to the law of armed conflict. The United States has now reached a critical point, I repeat, a critical point where we must use force in self-defense and defense of others against the ongoing attacks of these designated terrorist organizations, the memo says. Besides signaling a potential new moment in Trump's stated America First agenda, the United States is taking a much more dramatic step, one that I think is a very, very far stretch of international law and a dangerous one, said Matthew Waxman, who was a national security official in the George W. Bush administration. It means the United States can target members of those cartels with lethal force. It means that the United States can capture and detain them without trial. So let's talk a little bit about that last part, without trial, without due process. In the past, the Coast Guard was pretty active in working with, drug smugglers and the cartel, and that was fine. That's what our Coast Guard is for, protecting our coast. But now Trump is sending the U.S. Navy in there and the Marines and just blowing these people out of the water. I know, again, for the warmongers, that's me. Yeah, that's what we need to do. But here's the key thing. If it's a war on the cartel, and then he brings that war as an excuse to the homeland and say, okay, now we're out looking for cartel members and dangerous felons and stuff, there is his open door to bypass the Constitution and put boots on the ground in the U.S. And then pretty soon you start seeing all these armed and military people walking around in our streets, just like you see in North Korea, just like you see in the Soviet Union, just like you see in those third world countries. Are you ready to see? You're already at the Coast with the National Guard, federal authorization, seeing people walking around with helmets and M15 and tanks on our city streets. Are you ready for that? Well, what I just read there kind of gives you the open door that it's now a war on the drug cartel. So there's his excuse, and they, using his presidential authority to do that. See, that's scary stuff. And I know I've been around the block a few times myself in this world. So, those are things that you have to think about. Now, many have shared open concerns, and others that have noticed in the past the president's health issues on his cognitive abilities. Now, while I'm talking about this, see, here's the other thing about Donald Trump. There's been questions about his physical health, and because he's starting to, when he gets in these speeches, he gets off the teleprompter, he starts, rambling around a little bit, and that's what people are, somewhat concerned about, like, what's going on with this guy, and so during his campaign, he always made fun of Joe Biden, as you're well aware of. And now he himself is on the center stage showing the same, if not worse, symptoms of age or perhaps the beginning of dementia. The president sounded incoherent, exhausting, at times silly, a retired general said on conditions of autonomy when he was giving his speech. So first, and this is going to bring me to my top story today, is I want to kind of get into a little bit of a deep dive on the recent address, if that's what you want to call it, by Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump, because there are some things in that address of his that was just bizarre, and it even was bizarre to the general. So let me roll this clip first from Pete Hegseth, just some highlights from that speech. Watch this.
Too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We've pretended that combat arms and non-combat arms are the same thing. We've weeded out so-called toxic leaders under the guise of double-blind psychology assessments, promoting risk-averse, go-along-to-get-along conformists instead. You name it, the department did it. Foolish and reckless political leaders set the wrong compass heading, and we lost our way. We became the woke department, but not anymore. This administration has done a great deal from day one to remove the social justice, politically correct, and toxic ideological garbage that had infected our department, to rip out the politics. No more identity months, DEI offices, dudes in dresses. No more climate change worship. No more division, distraction, or gender delusions. No more debris. As I've said before, and will say again, we are done with that shit. Would you want him serving with fat or unfit or undertrained troops? Or alongside people who can't meet basic standards? Or in a unit where standards were lowered so certain types of troops could make it in? In a unit where leaders were promoted for reasons other than merit, performance, and warfighting? The answer is not just no, it's hell no. This means at the War Department, first and foremost, we must restore a ruthless, dispassionate, and common sense application of standards. I don't want my son serving alongside troops who are out of shape, or in combat unit with females who can't meet the same combat arms physical standards as men, or troops who are not fully proficient on their assigned weapons, platform, or task, or under a leader who was the first, but not the best. Standards must be uniform, gender neutral, and high. If not, they're not standards. They're just suggestions. Today, at my direction, each service will ensure that every requirement for every combat MOS, for every designated combat arms position, returns to the highest male standard only. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations, or really any formation, and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a 4-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the Joint Force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year, every year of service. Also today, at my direction, every warrior across our Joint Force is required to do PT every duty day. Should be common sense. I mean, most units do that already, but we're codifying it. And we're not talking like hot yoga and stretching. Real hard PT, either as a unit or as an individual. At every level, from the Joint Chiefs to everyone in this room to the youngest private, leaders set the standard. And so many of you do this already. Active, Guard, and Reserve. This also means grooming standards. No more beards, long hair, superficial individual expression. We're going to cut our hair, shave our beards, and adhere to standards. Because it's like, if not, then shave. We don't have a military full of Nordic pagans. But unfortunately, we have had leaders who either refuse to call BS and enforce standards, or leaders who felt like they were not allowed to enforce standards. Both are unacceptable. And that's why today, at my direction, the era of unprofessional appearance is over. No more beardos. The era of rampant and ridiculous shaving profiles is done. Simply put, if you do not meet the male-level physical standards for combat positions, cannot pass a PT test, or don't want to shave and look professional, it's time for a new position or a new profession. Upholding and demanding high standards is not toxic. Enforcing high standards, not toxic leadership. Leading warfighters toward the goals of high, gender-neutral, and uncompromising standards in order to forge a cohesive, formidable, and lethal Department of War is not toxic. It is our duty, consistent with our constitutional oath. Real toxic leadership is endangering subordinates with low standards. Real toxic leadership is promoting people based on immutable characteristics or quotas instead of based on merit. Real toxic leadership is promoting destructive ideologies that are an anathema to the Constitution and the laws of nature and nature's God. This is not about preventing women from serving. We very much value the impact of female troops. Our female officers and NCOs are the absolute best in the world. But when it comes to any job that requires physical power to perform in combat, those physical standards must be high and gender neutral. If women can make it, excellent. If not, it is what it is. If that means no women qualify for some combat jobs, so be it.
Now, as you could obviously see from those highlights, there are some weird things there. Viewers were stunned by Hegseth and Trump's bizarre Quantico speeches to the military chiefs. It could have been an email in his speech to the U.S. military top brass generals were silent as Hegseth ended his Macho Man Warrior Rally speech. Now, the reason I say it could be an email, it cost you, the taxpayers, millions of dollars to bring those 800 generals and their aides from around the world where they are stationed to that place in Virginia to listen to that Macho Man speech. As he kept saying, you know, I sent directives that would be in your inbox as soon as you arrive. Now, why he was giving that speech is just to make him, Pete Hegseth, look like, you know, I am your boss, which he technically is, and you're going to listen to me. And to follow up with Donald Trump, I don't know what that was all about. But anyway, so, you know, his speech was out with the millies and in with the patents. In other words, he does not ever appreciated the past processes that former presidents put into place to kind of downplay a little bit about this Macho Man Department of War stuff. And yes, we have a military, but you know, it had diversity, inclusion, and equity, you know, DEI, and he totally has done away with that. You know, there's no room for women in the military unless you can, you know, do the same thing the men do. There's no room for, you know, if you're gay or a lesbian, we don't want you there. You know, the don't ask, don't tell thing's completely out. If you are going through transition, or if you you have a gender identity issue, we don't want you. It's a man's army, and it can be a woman's army if you can do a man's army process. You know, and again, I am not down on the military. My father is a veteran of World War II, God rest his soul. My brother is a veteran of the Vietnam War, God rest his soul. My wife is a veteran of the United States Air Force, you know, thank her for her service. So I don't want to hear, you know, you're just anti-military. I by no means am not. So, and no, I personally did not serve because I was in college at the time. But I just want you all to understand, I am not anti-military. I love and respect the veterans 100%. So, but, you know, the speech by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was very unusual, and that's why a lot of those generals never even, you know, didn't even say a word. You know, so as you saw in that clip, he just went on. And of course, as for President Trump and his speech, a general stated that the president couldn't even hold a thought together. As well as his deliveries, viewers were stunned by the content and address by Trump and Pete Hegseth as well. But, you know, the other part, as you saw in that speech, you know, Hegseth told top brass to lose weight, shave their facial hair, and prepare for the possible deployment against the American public. That's what Trump was saying. And as far as this top brass calling them fat when they're in the Oval Office and they need to lose weight, well, Pete, the Commander-in-Chief, whom is our president, who is even above those top brass generals, I think he is just a tad overweight and obese. So are you going to tell your boss to lose weight? I don't think you will you? Oh, of course not. He can't do that. So I just find that kind of humorous that he would go on and rattle on about, you know, calling generals fat and that they got to meet the same requirements twice a year as the enlisted people in the NCOs, and yet his boss, the Commander-in-Chief, who's above the generals, is overweight himself, but he won't say anything about that. So and you know, people had huge concerns when Trump said that he announced plans that the military could use the American cities as training grounds before they are deployed overseas to learn how to fight. That was a scary, scary statement. You know, this address, ladies and gentlemen, was not necessary. It was a waste of a lot of taxpayers' dollars, and it was just an event for Pete Hegseth to stand up there and flex his muscles and do his Macho Man speech. And, you know, he says we're not going to be politically correct anymore when it comes to defending American freedom. The purpose of the surprise meeting was not shared beforehand. So all of those 800 generals that showed up there had no idea what was going on, and their aides. And, of course, a lot of them may get fired because they don't know what, you know, they're not going to do what he said that he wants them to do, you know, and shaving the facial hair and beards and mustaches, unless, you know, you're in SEAL Team 6 or something, you can't have that anymore, or longer hair. Now that I have mixed feelings for. In military, they've always had short haircuts and stuff, you know, and the women had to wear their hairs in bobs if they had long hair when they're in uniform. Okay, I get that maybe a little bit, but you know, the rest of it though, he doesn't want any more woke generals. If you're woke, get the hell out. He said that about the women, and there were women who are, you know, high-ranking generals in there. I saw them in the audience, and he told the women, you know, from now on, you're going to do the same thing the men do in basic training. If they're carrying 90-pound packs, you're going to carry it too. If they shoot, and, you know, you're going to shoot too. And I think most of those women have been able to do that. You know, we have women fighter pilots that have done extremely well. And we've had women get highly decorated. But he says now a lot of these women are highly decorated because it was a first for them. They didn't get highly decorated because they did their job. It was a woke thing that they got decorated. You know, Pete Hegseth is so full of crap on some of this stuff, you know. Democratic Senator Ruben Gallio, he was an Iraq war veteran. He said on a post X, this meeting could have been easily done in an email, which I just talked about. You know, the millions of dollars that was spent on that. You know, Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, called the presentation an expensive, dangerous declaration of leadership. So, you know, his ultimatum to America's senior officers to conform to his political worldview or step aside, he said, was a dangerous, extremely dangerous statement. It signals partisan loyalty matters more than capability, judgment, or service to the Constitution, undermining the principle of professional, nonpartisan military. And he's got a point there. Between Trump and Hegseth's speech, it's basically, we want you all to conform to the Republican ideology of what we want. Thus the name of Department of Defense, Department of War. We want you to conform to the Republican side of how things are going to be, or step aside, or we will fire you. And that's what has, you know, what it has become. Now, before I move on, I want you to watch Trump's portion of this speech highlights. Watch this.
I've never walked into a room so silent before. That's enough to buy a lot of battleships, Admiral, to use an old term. I think we should maybe start thinking about battleships, by the way. You know, when I walk downstairs for like I'm on stairs, like these stairs. I walk very slowly. Nobody has to set a record. Just try not to fall, because it doesn't work out well. A few of our presidents have fallen, and it became a part of their legacy. And it was really a stupid person that works for him mentioned the word nuclear. We can't let people throw around that word. I call it the N-word. There are two N-words, and you can't use either of them. But the firemen go up on ladders, and you have people shooting at them while they're up on ladders. I don't even know if anybody heard that. And I said, don't talk about it much, but I think you have to. Our firemen are incredible.
So, again, you can see Donald Trump with his rambling on there, and that's where people had concerns about his, mental capacity. When he's not using the teleprompter or the crowd is not playing to him, he gets very confused very quickly, like something's wrong. Why aren't you worshiping me? Why aren't you applauding? Why aren't you laughing? And there were a few, there that were, being condescending and laughing with him. But, he gets off track very quickly if he doesn't see the reactions that he wants. It's bizarre. Hegseth went on to say we're not the woke department anymore, and we're not going to do that. He says we are done with that shit. This is a man who he himself calls a Christian. This is the other thing too during this speech. Hegseth calls himself a Christian, which is a Christ follower. And he prays and all that. Yet at the same moment, he's telling everybody there he's using curse words. He even had one thing there where he said the F word. You can tell everybody else to F off. And he said he's empowered NCOs again that they can swear and cuss as much as they want, and they can literally put their hands on soldiers and push them if they want. I say no, I don't want them to get physically harmed, but they can push and shove and cuss at them again and stuff. Well, if you're a true Christian, you don't cuss and swear and tell people to F off and demeanor your fellow human being. But you're still a Christian, I see. Okay, so. He cried foul on transgender humans and again about the overweight general. So, to me, folks, this whole thing as I wrap this up was bizarre. It was just a huge waste of money. It was the most unusual. It has never been done before and it was a national security risk too, to pull all of those military top brass from their stations around the world and bring them in there just so he could use his authority to tell them how things are going to be. That was not necessary. And it was not necessary, for President Trump to stand up behind there too and then just go on and on and on and on about, what he wants, and maybe you could use your training here in the United States. And my God, folks, it was just ungodly. And again, I have strong concerns because this is another example where you saw Donald Trump just totally off. I mean, he was off. He had trouble completing a thought, and he looked lost in those speeches. And he's the same guy that completely condemned Joe Biden, who, is old himself, and he was off a little bit. But Trump himself now is approaching 80 years old. And there are times when he is, up in the butt and doing quite well when he's got a teleprompter in front of him, or he's playing before, loyal Republicans. But, and things like this, he was just... He was saying some bizarre things. And, when he met with the European Commission, and President Ursula von der Leyen, he abruptly switched from discussing immigration to saying, the other thing I want, and this is a quote, and you can see this. He says, the other thing I want to say to Europe, we will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery. Trump proceeded to speak nonstop and unprompted for 2 minutes about windmills when he's supposed to be having a meeting with the European people. and claiming without evidence that they drive whales loco and that the wind energy kills the birds. The proportion of birds killed by turbines is tiny compared to the number killed by domestic cats and from flying into power lines. But the abrupt changes in conversation is an example of Trump digressing without thinking. He'll just switch topics without self-regulation, without having a coherent narrative. So said Harry Segal, a senior lecturer on psychology from the Department of Cornell University and in the psychiatry department at Cornell Medicine. For years, Trump has batted away questions about his mental acuity, describing himself as a stable genius and bragging about acing exams, which were later to reveal to be very simple tests which check for early signs of dementia. But Democrats have begun to become more aggressively questioning the president's fitness, including Jasmine Crockett, who he totally dislikes her, the representative from Texas, and California Governors Gavin Newsom, and this week alone offered multiple examples of Trump's exhibiting odd conduct. Asked about the famine in Gaza on Sunday, again, Trump seemed unable to remember the aid the U.S. has given Gaza and forgot that others have also contributed to the Gaza people, which very little aid that they're getting at all. Trump claimed that the U.S. gave $60 million 2 weeks ago. He added, "You really at least want to have somebody say thank you. No other country gave anything. Nobody acknowledged it. Nobody talks about it, and makes you feel a little bad when you do that, and you know you have other countries not giving anything. None of the European countries, by the way, gave. I mean, nobody gave but us." Trump seemed to not realize or remember that other countries have given money to Gaza. The UK alone gave $80 million packages in July. The European Union has allocated $195 million in aid. But the United States, there's no record of them even giving $60 million 2 weeks ago. There's no record of that at all. In June, the U.S. State Department approved a $30 million grant to the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which is a group backed by Israeli and U.S. interests, which have been criticized by Democrats as connected to deadly violence against starving people seeking food in Gaza. Now, as you know, tomorrow on Sunday, I'm taping this on Saturday. That's supposed to be the deadline for Hamas to decide what they're going to do about releasing the hostages. And of course, Trump has been signaling to Israel that it's going to be an all-out annihilation if they don't follow through of the Gaza Strip. So, please pray for the innocent people in Palestine. They're going to have to be going through that if that does happen. So, anyway. It just goes on and on about Trump's mental acuity, and we don't know if he's declining or if they're hiding something. I don't know, but it's strange, and we've seen this on, and I've done a previous podcast about that. There are over 9 professional, high-level psychologists who have been watching and looking at Trump and his speeches, and every one of them have said that the man is starting to show early signs of dementia, and it's progressing. And I know all of his aides, and everybody will do all they can to cover that up and blame it on something, or failed teleprompters and stuff like that. But you've seen it, and Trump's and networks are starting to break away now from when Trump talks. Because once he gets off the teleprompter or gets off topic, he just rattles on for hours, and then people are like, they break away and go on to something else, because he says things that just makes absolutely zero sense when they get him in front of a microphone. And I don't know if the aides are going to start to cut down his time on camera. I mean, he loves the people in the press. He just feeds off of that. But I don't know if they're going to, and he loves photo ops. And he'll just call them, quick emergency press conferences so he can get in front of the camera. And then he just, I don't know. It's just, I know I do not like people who, when even with President Joe Biden, if you are to the point to where you're physical and mental ability is going to not allow you to perform your duties into the office that you were put into, it is time to step aside and let somebody else take over. That's just basically it. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, if you're unable to perform your duties that you were elected to do, it's time to step aside, not try to cover it up and have people prop you up. I don't like J.D. Vance or anybody else on the Republican side, but if Trump, if he's unable to perform his duties, then it's time to let J.D. Vance step aside. Same with Joe Biden. That's why Kamala Harris ran. It was obvious that Joe Biden, at his age that he was at, I don't think he could have done another term. So it's just the nature of the thing. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It really, really isn't. Democrat or Republican is nothing to be ashamed of. If your physical acuity is starting to digress a little bit, it's this part of getting old. God bless us, we all age. So, but so there's a point where you got to stop being proud and step aside. Trump is also racking up pressure for Republicans to redraw congressional maps across the country, going as far as weighing a primary challenge to New Hampshire Governor Kelly Tully. If she continues avoiding a remapping effort in her state, Trump was giving her a huge warning. Something's going to happen, with your state, cut funding and things like that. He wants everybody in the Republican Party to start redrawing up their district maps so the Republicans can hold on to the House of Representatives. They are scared. They are scared about the midterms, and they will do all they can, legal or illegal, to make sure that they can hold on to the majority. And he's also exploring repercussions to the Republicans in the state of Indiana if they don't redraw their district maps. Texas has already done it, so he wants this all taken care of. All right. I have no news on the state of Florida on this particular podcast, but I really wanted to take a deep dive into this thing with Pete Hegseth and Trump on this meeting with the top generals. That was the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. I watched the entire video of both Trump's hour-long going off into different parts of his speech, and it was a sad thing to see. And Pete Hegseth's thing of his Macho Man Rah-Rah, again, was uncalled for. I think that could have been done by email. It was a waste of taxpayers' dollars to bring all those people there just so he could humiliate them and put the fear of God into them. It was not necessary. But again, he wants the media to see just how strong and powerful he is. I'm Pete Hegseth, and look at me, and I don't know, folks, you be the judge. This country, it's getting scary. It really is. More and more and more. The United States is looking like pre-1939 Germany, isn't it? With the people armed people on the streets, military, Project 2025, and more power to one person where Congress can't even do anything about it, especially if you have the majority. You better hope and pray in the midterms there's a little shift in I know the Democrats don't stand a chance in hell of getting the Senate, but they stand a very good chance with voters to at least get back the House, and then some stopgaps can be put in place. All right, you take care. Until next time, you try to have a good week. This is Roy Garton with the Right Has Left podcast. You take care.